For decades, one port has quietly carried the weight of two nations. Every day, crude oil from landlocked South Sudan travels through 1,500 kilometers of pipelines. The oil eventually reaches Port Sudan on the Red Sea for global export. From there, massive tankers carry that oil to markets across Asia and beyond. If this single port stopped operating for even a short period, billions would be lost. This would place enormous pressure on the economies of both Sudan and South Sudan. Now, something much bigger is taking shape as China expands key parts of Port Sudan.
China is modernizing port facilities, improving cargo handling, and supporting infrastructure for this busy corridor.
This could increase the port's role in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes.
But why has China continued investing in Sudan, despite years of political instability and conflict?
How important is this port to Beijing's long-term plans in Africa? To answer those questions, we first need to understand why Port Sudan is so strategically important.
Many countries are paying close attention to what happens there next.
Location is one of the biggest reasons Port Sudan attracts so much international attention. The port sits on the western coast of the Red Sea, between the Suez Canal and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Together, these waterways form one of the world's most important shipping corridors.
It links Europe with Asia through the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean.
Every year, thousands of cargo ships, oil tankers, and container vessels pass through this route.
Around 12 to 15% of global trade moves through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal system.
When disruptions occur, companies often have to reroute vessels around the Cape of Good Hope. This adds nearly 6,000 nautical miles to some voyages and increases transit times significantly. It also raises fuel and insurance costs for shipping companies. Port Sudan sits only a short distance from this major shipping lane. Ships do not have to make a long detour to reach the port. This makes it an efficient stop for cargo and energy exports. This port is also the backbone of Sudan's economy.
Around 90 to 95% of the country's international trade moves through its terminals.
Ships do not have to make a long detour to reach the port.
They are then transported inland by road and rail.
Any disruption at the port quickly affects supply chains across the country. This leads to shortages and higher prices for consumers.
Exports are just as important. Sudan ships livestock to Gulf countries and sesame seeds to food processors around the world.
It also exports gum arabic, which is used in soft drinks, pharmaceuticals, and food products,
along with cotton, minerals, and agricultural commodities.
Yet, one export stands far above the rest in economic value.
Crude oil.
Although South Sudan holds most of the oil reserves,
It depends almost entirely on Sudan's infrastructure. Crude oil travels through two major pipeline systems. The Greater Nile Oil Pipeline carries oil from central Sudan to the Bashayr Marine Terminal, while the Petrodar Pipeline transports crude from South Sudan's oil-producing regions to the same export facilities. Together, these pipelines form an energy network stretching roughly 1,500 to 1,600 kilometers. Once the oil reaches Port Sudan, it enters large storage tanks before moving through loading systems. Giant tankers then carry the crude to customers across Asia.
China has historically ranked among the largest buyers of Sudanese oil.
Every shipment generates export income for South Sudan and transit fees for Sudan. This creates an economic relationship that neither country can easily replace.
To understand why China is involved in the expansion of Port Sudan, we need to go back to the 1990s.
Crude oil.
Civil war, international sanctions, and political instability discouraged many Western companies from investing.
Large oil deposits had already been identified. Yet, turning those reserves into export revenue required billions of dollars in infrastructure. Sudan could not finance this on its own. China saw an opportunity.
In 1995, China National Petroleum Corporation entered Sudan's oil industry.
It gradually became the largest foreign investor in the country's energy sector, joining the Greater Nile Petroleum Operating Company alongside Malaysia's Petronas.
India's ONGC Videsh and Sudan's state-owned Sudapet also joined. Together, these companies developed some of Sudan's largest oil fields. Finding oil was only the first step. The much bigger challenge was transporting it across a country with limited infrastructure. Chinese engineers helped construct the Greater Nile Oil Pipeline, a project that stretched roughly 1,540 kilometers from the oil fields to the Red Sea. Construction moved quickly.
In August 1999, Sudan exported crude oil for the first time in its history.
That single pipeline changed the country's economy.
Oil rapidly became Sudan's largest export. Rapidly became Sudan just export.
Within a few years, production climbed to more than 450,000 barrels per day.
Although output later declined because of maturing fields. South Sudan's independence in 2011 and years of political instability followed. China's involvement did not stop with the pipeline. CNPC also helped finance and build the Khartoum refinery. When it opened in 2000, it became Sudan's largest refinery, reducing the country's dependence on imported petroleum products. Oil rapidly became Sudan's largest export. Rapidly became Sudan just export.
Chinese companies participated in pumping stations, storage facilities, and power systems.
When it opened in 2000, it became Sudan's largest refinery. The relationship also became increasingly important for China. During the 2000s, Sudan ranked among China's largest crude oil suppliers in Africa. At one point, China purchased well over half of Sudan's exported oil. In return, Chinese banks and construction companies continued financing roads and bridges. South Sudan's independence in 2011 changed the picture.
But it did not end this partnership.
Around 3/4 of the former United Sudan's oil reserves became part of the new country. However, South Sudan inherited almost no export infrastructure. The pipelines, refineries, and marine terminal remained inside Sudan. That meant both countries had no practical choice but to continue working together. South Sudan needed the pipelines to reach international markets. While Sudan relied on transit fees and processing charges to generate revenue.
This shared dependence is one of the main reasons Port Sudan remains so important today. The infrastructure built over the past 3 decades still forms the backbone of the region's oil exports.
However, much of that system now faces increasing pressure from aging facilities.
Keeping this gateway competitive requires more than routine maintenance. It requires a new phase of investment, and that is where the current expansion projects begin.
In July 2026, Sudan's Seaports Corporation signed a framework agreement with China Harbor Engineering Company to modernize Port Sudan.